Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. We're going to discuss Vechain and the price of mass adoption, the price at full mass adoption. Well, I don't think you can say full because there can also always be more adoption. But we're going to do a lot of like cross-industry references because I don't actually have numbers for the logistics industry. I don't think that's numbers they actually release publicly. But we do know about what kind of TPS that Visa actually handles. Well, we can actually make a guess. Visa is capable of running 24,000 transactions per second, but it never reaches 24,000 transactions per second. At peak hours, they register about 4,000 transactions per second. So normally I would guess they were about half that, about 2,000 transactions per second. So 2,000 transactions per second is roughly 172,800,000 transactions per day. Now, if you actually look at Vechain's mainnet records, the highest number of daily transactions is 115,893. The highest VTHO daily burn rate is 35,381,000. Now, remember that since then, they've actually sliced the VTHO burn by 100, so it'd be 353,000 VTHO burn on the highest daily transactions. So even though those aren't on the same day, they're going to be pretty close. And my estimate is roughly 100,000 daily transactions roughly equates to what used to be 30 million VTHO burned, but now is 300,000 VTHO burned. So roughly 100,000 daily transactions would actually be about 300,000 VTHO burned. Now, if Vechain got adopted as much as Visa, and I know logistics and payments are two different things, and I actually think there's probably more transactions in Vechain's market of healthcare and logistics. Is for every product they scan, that is actually a TX. So there might actually be more, but we're just going to do like comparable to Visa, and Visa is kind of a standard of payments. Now, it is not 100% of the payments market, just like Vechain will not be 100% of the logistics slash healthcare market. I do think the logistics slash healthcare market is probably bigger in terms of transactions than actual payments, and they're not basically like completely confined to logistics and payments. There's a lot of transactions per second for DeFi. Remember, DeFi basically overflowed Ethereum's ecosystem just like that, and it's producing like hundreds of transactions per second by itself. But anyways, Visa basically does 172,800,000 TXs per day. And Vechain's, to burn 300,000 VTHO, you need 100,000 TXs per day, which means that Visa actually does 1,728 times the TXs that Vechain actually does. So if you take 300,000 VTHO and you multiply it by 1,728, you get about 518 million VTHO burned if Vechain equals Visa's adoption. Now, like I said, two different industries, obviously, but I don't have data for the actual logistics industry or the healthcare industry, or or I can only guess what DeFi will be at its greatest extent. But if all those industries for Vechain put together equals the the adoption of Visa right now, let's say in 10 years or so, it will be 518 million VTHO burned. Obviously, that's a lot more than the VTHO generated because they only generate about 37 million a day. So there will be a lot of speculative pressure. I guess you could just divide it by 15, and then you could say, oh, then Vechain's price would be like $3.50, $4 at that point. And that would be like a stable price. But I don't actually think that's the actual case, because once we near certain points and near certain VTHO burns, it tends to go up exponentially. So I believe at this like mass adoption price, VET could possibly be $5, $10, or even greater. Let's say like, $10, $12 if Vechain gets adopted as much as Visa. And that is a big, big if, people, because this industry is very, very new. So saying that any of these competitors will get adopted as much as Visa is right now, which is one of the dominant payment providers, Visa and MasterCard provide roughly for the United States, they probably provide like 90%. But remember, Vechain is not confined to one country either. And obviously, like when you talk about like Visa, MasterCard, you're not and their percentage, you're not talking about like Union Pay and all those like other issuers in other countries. So if Vechain gets adopted as much as Visa is right now, let's say in 10 years, 518 million VTHO burn, that's like over 10 times what's generated. I think that will push the price up dramatically for both Vechain and Vitho. And I think Vechain can be $10 plus, out there 5-10 years from now at this mass adoption. Remember, Sunny Lou's basic roadmap is that through 2021, which is this year, it would be regulations, and then 2022 to 2025 would be mass adoption. I think obviously mass adoption will stretch past 2025, and even when they're in the mature stage, there'll still be more adoption. Remember, Visa's taken a long time to get to these numbers. So if you give Vechain the equivalent time, you could see $10+ plus for VET, possibly higher. Because once you're like this much above the 37 million Vitho burn mark, it's really hard to say how they'll adjust the ecosystem and how that'll affect the price. But we can say for sure before it gets to this mark, it will exponentially flip. So I'm going to guess maybe like $10, maybe $12 if it actually gets to this price. So I think those prices are possible, but they are maybe a decade or more out, which is extremely hard to project because you don't really know what companies are actually going to be around at that point. Remember, back in 1998, when I was just getting on the internet, Google wasn't the predominant search engine. It was still web crawler, Alta Vista, and other things. Google wasn't even in the equation until like basically the year 2000, and then they took over. So anything could actually happen in this market, but I'm saying if Vechain gets the same adoption as Visa does in the payment market, it could possibly get to that point. So that is the news for today. Let me know what you think, like and subscribe, and hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.